I remember sitting in my office having a meeting with a manager. And all of a sudden, we heard this loud shouting in the corridor, coming down the corridor. And we got up to investigate, of course. And when we got to the corridor, when we headed to the corridor, we realized that is not happening here, that is happening down the corridor and turn left. And that location was the senior leader's office. And we realized, but we do recognize that voice to be the senior leader's voice. And that individual was talking to a manager, and the manager walked out the office, passed us, whooshed straight, and went to his office, did his resignation letter, and left. And that event stayed with me through the years. This was about 10 years ago. Have you ever witnessed such a behavior from a leader that you probably admire? Or probably you were the person on the other side of the table trying to, negotiate your way through this situation. And, then I wondered myself, what happens that somebody would leave their home, because no one leaves home an agenda to put their pressure up and to have a fight with their manager. No one leaves home with their agenda to rant and rave. So what it is that we're missing in our leadership training and development? What's that gap that we're not seeing that leave leaders exposed to themselves? They are a victim to themselves. And when we speak about organizational development, we want the kind of leader that can make a difference, a leader that can enlist the hearts and mind of his team members and his management team. Now, when we're speaking about organizational development, we're looking at an approach that is holistic and humanistic. We must be humanistic. And organizational development is not just concerned with facilitating change in organizations, but it's also concerned, it should be, I should say, concerned with putting people's heart at the process, in the middle of the process. The hearts and minds of our team members, of our members of staff, they are the ones who drive the organization, not the structures. We know that in terms of organization development, we must focus on the structures. We must address the strategic direction of the company, the business objectives, how we may engage in our stakeholders. All those things, all those elements are up for change. But we must also take in consideration those almost invisible aspects of an organization, those threads that weave the organization together, which in essence is the organization culture. And you and I know where the culture is supported, it's supported by the employees themselves. So if we want to embark on an organizational development exercise, we must be a leader who can enlist the hearts and enlist the minds of your team member and also the general member of staff. Now, I want you to think for me about a leader that you admire. Someone over the years, and probably from afar, someone over the years that you've been following quietly, and ask yourself, what is it in that leader that draws you to them? What do you admire so much? And I promise you, it's not going to be because of their project management skills or because of their organization skills. It will be because they stood up for something. It will be because their values seem to connect with you and your values. So understand that leadership is so much more than our technical skills. Leadership is so much more than our being able to do the budgets and being able to do reports and running a sales meeting. It's so much more than that. When we think about leaders, we think about people who can transform their organization and transform their people. And Malala comes to mind. A lot of young women look up to Malala and will follow her online. And we know Malala's story of being the girl who was on her way to school in the bus when she was shot in her head by the Taliban. And the miracle, it was really a miracle that she survived. And even more than surviving, she has lived on to be an advocate for girls' education. So Malala even went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize. So when we talk about leadership, we're not talking about her organization skills, are we? We're not talking about her technical skills, are we? We're talking about her values and what she stands for, and her debate. If you hear her speak, her debate with world leaders and her cause. And speaking about world leaders and cause, we must, divert our attention to Ardern's leadership style. The female Prime Minister of New Zealand, and she is one that's loved by her community, by her parliament, at least on her side. And it's really because of her approach, the empathy that she showed, particularly in this situation where Muslims were gathered for prayer and somebody decided that they are going to shoot Muslims on that day. And it was the darkest day, she said, in New Zealand's history. And within 24 hours, she was underground in her garb, expressing her sympathy and showing empathy to those in need. And this is what leadership looks like. It's not necessarily about the technical. It's more about how we can connect and how we can feel and support someone else. Now, this is one side of leadership. This is the leadership that connects with me, and I'm sure it connects with you. But if we're talking about, the academics of a leadership, we're talking about when they do the research to show us the other hard side of leadership. Now, this research, the critical skills that leaders need, I'm going to share with you some information based on a survey that was completed with 300,000 business leaders. So it was a self-reported survey. And this survey was about leadership development. It was conducted by some consultants, as you see there. And this survey told us that the results told us that these are the 10 top skills that a leader needs to succeed. And I'm sure plenty leaders here will agree that some of those skills are really critical for success. My question to you, however, is it enough? Is it sufficient for success? The innovation, the driving results, are all those things sufficient for success? Why is it that we can have leaders who would have been trained in the best organizations, the best universities, the best leadership programs in the world, and yet still when they are underground, yet still when they interact with their team, it seems like something is still missing? It seems to me that this leadership gap persists, even in the name of research and even in the name of learning and development for our leaders. And this leadership gap is, it keeps widening. And the question is, how do we close that gap? And I promise you, it's not what you think it is. It cannot be more training and development, because millions and millions of dollars around the world have been spent on training and development of leaders. So what is that gap? What is missing? Is it that it's so much a secret that no one is telling us? And I wonder, based on my research and observation, I could tell you that is not what you think, not what most people would think. I want to also share with you that when you think about leading a team, you think about the challenges sometimes. And I guess that's why we go and we do our training and our development and our coaching. But you might very well be the most difficult person that you will ever have to lead, because you will be, or probably are, so steeped in your ways, your habits, that you might be very difficult to lead. I'm talking about leading yourself. I'm talking about self-leadership. So when we're speaking about leadership, the first thing we have to do is turn inward. We have to lead from within. And that starts with self-leadership, which is more than just a process, but it's really delving into your thoughts, your aspirations, your motivations. Why do we do what we do? Why did that leader, that head of the organization, why did that leader respond in such a manner that we as a team would not be proud of, and such a manner that that individual also would not be proud of? So self-leadership is so critical, because we need to understand ourselves. We need to build our awareness so that we can monitor how we respond and how we react. when we speak about self-leadership, it's easy to put it under 4 pillars to get a better understanding of self-leadership. And when we speak about self-discovery, there's some particular things we want to zero in, like your values, your 5th why, your vision for yourself. Then we will move over and look at self-awareness, your self-management, how do you control your interaction? And of course, self-growth, because growth must be intentional. We shouldn't leave it by chance. It should be intentional. So let's take a look at self-discovery. Being the best leader really means identifying your values and ensuring that you're living and that you're leading in accordance to these values. And that's what we call, in essence, an authentic leader. Are you an authentic leader? Have you been a wrong and authentic leader? What's the difference between an authentic leader and another leader? If you understand your values, then you can let it guide your decision making. Then with some self-management, you can decide how you want to respond to certain situations. And self-leadership is important to identify your values, identify your why, even your vision, because that could energize you. What you believe in, you will stand for, and it will definitely help you in your leadership decisions and also help you build your confidence. So when we talk about self-discovery and we're talking about understanding ourselves and being more self-aware, we're definitely talking about knowing what our superpowers are. What are your superpowers? Do you know? What are your strengths? Do you know what your strengths are? Think about what you're probably good at. Think about what people ask you to do, what they're complimenting you about. Look at your unique assets, your positive attributes. What are your strengths? And if you're not sure what your strengths are, then you can ask someone that you trust. And if you discover what your superpower is, that skill, that virtue that you do most likely better than other persons, if you discover what your superpower is, you're ahead of the game. I remember many years ago, I was doing a train-the-trainer program. And as part of the program, the trainer said, actually, she had a white flip chart paper on the wall, and she said, write your gifts. So everybody went on the wall and was writing their gifts. I had none to write. I really did not know my gift. So, it was a 2-day session. So I said, listen, when I go home, I'm going to ask Abiel. So I went home and I asked Abiel. Now, Abiel is my 4-year-old daughter at that time. And I said, Abiel, my dear, what is mommy's gift? And she said to me, she said, Mommy, your gift is to give huggies. And she gave me a big hug. I said, okay, out of the mouth of babes. So I went back to the class the following day and I wrote on the flip chart, my gift is to give huggies. I was surprised that he accepted it. But yes, that day, my gift was to give huggies. Fast forward some years after, I'm doing a training program for a client, and this was a supervisory training program. And in that session, we spoke about leadership, and individuals had some hurts, and there were tears, and there was laughter as we played our games to learn the lessons. And at the end of that session, my colleague and I, we were standing at the door, and there was a line of 25 persons. There were 25 persons in the session. There was a line of 25 persons, waiting to pass through that door. Would you guess? Can you guess what they were waiting on? Yes, they were waiting on a huggy. And that just blew my mind. And from that moment, I knew that my gift was, and is to give a huggy. So what is your superpower? It'll be really good for you to find out what your superpower is so that you now can use that superpower to develop yourself. And at your advantage, you can lean in your superpower to do your work. You can lean in your superpower in your personal life also. So find out what your superpower is. So on the flip side of superpower, we have areas to develop. Now, in HR, we do not speak about weaknesses. Oh, no. We don't speak about weaknesses at all. We call them areas to develop. So what are your areas to develop? As leaders should always be, on top of their game in terms of understanding what their areas to develop are. We can't always just focus on our strengths because it's going to be lopsided. We can't ignore our areas to develop. So think about the improvements that you want to make, you need to make personally and professionally, make on a general level and also on a leadership level. What are some of the negative attributes that you will want to remove? What will help you become a better leader and a better person? So think about the areas that you will want to develop. Now, if we move from areas to develop, the next thing we must look at is self-management. Now, self-management and self-discipline are so closely linked, sometimes we use them interchangeably. But I want to focus on self-management here because it involves holding yourself accountable for your actions, for your decisions, for your behavior. You hold yourself accountable for everything you do in life, at work, and also in your personal life. It also allows you to ensure that you are managing your time and your resources effectively and efficiently. Now, self-management is so critical, as I shared earlier, my story about that senior leader in the organization. If that leader had tuned into some self-management skills, if that leader had, tuned into himself in terms of being self-aware, if that leader had used some emotional intelligence and self-regulation, probably that situation would not have happened. Probably that manager would not have resigned. So self-management is about self-regulation. It's about understanding your triggers, understanding what really ticks you off. And how do you respond? And how can you cool down? Do you need that timeout? Do you need to count to 5, to count to 10? Know what you need to regulate and to manage yourself. Another element of self-management is emotional intelligence. We must be aware as leaders. We can't be going around and not observing around us how people are responding. I remember a leader said to me many years ago that when she walks in her office, she wouldn't know whether her admin assistant is having a good morning or not, if she's smiling or if she's crying. Now, as leaders, we have to learn whether it's your style or not, because sometimes people say it's not your personality. Whether it's your style or not, because you're a leader, you have to learn to tune in. You have to learn to lean in and observe the people around you. How are they doing? Are they operating out of the norm? And it's as simple as asking, how are you doing? So emotional intelligence is critical for a leader. It's critical for self-management in a self-leadership realm. Another element we have to look at as a leader is empathy. You see that leadership gap I'm telling you about? Empathy may very well fill that gap. We need to be able to exercise empathy and understand how people are feeling. And empathy is not sympathy. Mind you, it's not sympathy. Empathy is being able to walk in someone else's shoes. Sometimes all you need to do is walk in your shoes and listen. So empathy allows us to show up as a bigger, better leader. It allows us to support someone. It allows us to be sensitive to their needs. So we adjust our behavior. Now might not be a good time to have a conversation on what they're doing wrong and what they need to brush up and how they need to step up if something is happening in their personal life. So empathy, I can't stress it enough. It's a critical skill for managers. Now, as we talk about self-leadership, we all have some habits that we really want. Probably we don't want to eliminate them, but we have some habits that are serving us and are not serving us. You need to have that conversation with yourself. All leaders should have that conversation with themselves and identify what are some behaviors that are non-productive. If we're spending hours on the couch in the afternoon watching Netflix, and in the morning we can't even remember what the show was about, and I could confess that was me at one point in time, we need to identify our behaviors that are not serving us and that are counterproductive to what we want to achieve. I call those self-defeating behaviors. It's almost as if we're self-sabotaging ourselves and we can't stop. Delving into self-leadership allows you to have those conversations, what we call self-conversations. deep self conversations, conversations with yourself. Yes, conversations with yourself. So you can identify what behaviors you want to eliminate, you want to get rid of. Those self-defeated, self-sabotaging behaviors. And then you want to examine those behaviors that are productive, that give you energy, that energizes you. And I call those life-giving behaviors, those behaviors that lift you up and give you life and strength and energy to go forward. So self-management is looking at your behaviors, is expressing and using empathy, is regulating yourself. All this wrap up for self-management. If we manage ourselves, then we can be not only better leaders, but better humans also. So now that we have looked at all those different elements, you know that the next thing that we should be looking at is what are we going to do with the information? And that's where self-growth comes in. Are we just going to go through the motions, learn some lessons as we go through life and not really take it and use it for growth? Now, self-growth must be intentional. We can't leave it for chance. It happens by chance. And self-leadership allows us to focus on self-growth because it operates like an umbrella over all these various elements, and we wrap them up, and now we have arrived at self-growth. And if you want to become a better leader, we must focus on our personal growth to become a better leader, and not just a better leader, but a better person. So recognize, what you're doing. We have to learn to call out ourselves when we're not doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. We have to learn to call ourselves out when we're engaging in self-sabotaging behavior. All that is part of self-growth. Now, it's my hope here that, you're encouraged to delve into self-leadership, to find out about your values, to find out about your fifth why, to find out what your vision is for yourself as a leader, that you will take that information, that you would look at the information and really use it to develop a path going forward. This thing called leadership, it's not as difficult as they make it seem, all these, high courses and fancy university programs. Self-leadership allows us to delve deep in, find out about ourselves, and create a better version of ourselves. That's what self-leadership does. It allows us to show up as an authentic leader. So don't make it too difficult. Self-leadership allows us to close that leadership gap of focusing on all the external, the project management, the driving results, the innovation. We have to start leading from within. Because without leading from within, we're really putting on mask and pretending, I would say, not bringing our full self. If we're not pretending, we're not bringing our full self to our leadership role. Actually, you're cheating yourself. You're cheating yourself and you're cheating those around you. So self-leadership can act as filling that gap, that leadership gap that we see around us. Not the technical skills, but the skills that we need to develop as an individual, as a professional, and as a leader. It allows us to live and to lead in a true, authentic manner. So if you want to be a better leader, don't look too far. If you want to be a better leader, just be a better human and be a better you. So I hope this was useful for you, and I hope you will take this time to be a better human being.